oh, your quilt.
Yeah.
But this is the first time we've seen each other face to face. Hey, Christopher.
Carole,
I know Chris said he has to go to work and he wanted to ask you a question in the beginning before he had to pop off. So
Sure.
first, Carole, Chris, Carole. Now you guys know each other, but go ahead, Kristen, if you want to ask your question, and then we'll get started.
yeah. Can you hear?
Yes, you broke up a little bit, but go ahead.
Give me a second. I wrote it down.
Oh my goodness. I
Um,
feel like a rock star.
I always look at your quotes and like how the colors simply complement each other. And I wanted to know, how do you approach color, and what exactly are you looking for when you decide to choose your color scheme?
Okay. Easy answer is, if you look behind me, there's this print fabric.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
on a lot of fabrics, print fabrics, this one has text, move my hand. The other one is more, florals or whatever. Most of those fabrics have those little dots on the selvage,
Okay,
the color dots.
ma'am.
The designer has given you the color scheme.
Okay.
If you just follow those dots and pick, there might be 10 dots. You may decide to use five of those additional colors with your work. And like the quilt behind me, I just, I can kind of look at the fabric and see the solids I want to use, but that's one easy way. And I started out doing it that way for years. Now I also use my color wheel. And in my improv workshop, we learn a lot about using the color wheel to help us select different color fabrics or palettes than we might normally use.
That's wonderful.
So those are the two tips.
Thank
Easy
you.
peasy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a few questions, kind of, Carole, and then we can jump into
Okay.
The rest of it. But first off, tell us how you got started quilting. Did somebody teach you, or did you self-taught?
Sure. And how is my sound, by the way? Okay.
Good.
I started as a self-taught quilter. I went to the library, and this is over 25 years ago, 30 years ago now. I went to the library, got books out of the library, and there were a couple of TV shows on, one called Quilt in a Day by a woman named Eleanor Burns. She's just fabulous because she has this very free, kind of casual approach to quilting. And then, she would cut something off and throw it over her shoulder, throw the scraps on the floor, and just delightful sense of humor. So I watched TV shows, I got books, magazines, Quilter's Newsletter magazine. And then I met the wonderful women in the African American Quilters of Baltimore. And they took me under their wing and taught me the fundamentals, because I really didn't know them. I was kind of making it up as I went along. Mm-hmm. Some things I got right, and some things I'm sure some of those early older quilts have fallen apart in the washing machine. But they really taught me the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they were seriously teaching like how to hand quilt 10 stitches to the inch or less, 12 or more, I guess, 12 stitches, needle turn applique, how to choose fabrics, what to look for in fabric in terms of the quality, and just so much more about how to actually make a quilt. And I'm still a member to this day, even though I live in Florida. Now that we've been meeting virtually, so I've been able to attend meetings.
Yeah.
So that's how I learned, self-taught. I just decided one day to make quilts for nieces and nephews. Mm-hmm. I was not a sewer. I had taken one class in junior high and didn't like it. So I just woke up one day and it just hit me that this was something I wanted to do.
So did you start out doing traditional
Oh yeah.
blocks?
Yeah. I did all the traditional things, 9-patch, 4-patch, log cabins, which I really liked. Those I loved doing log cabins.
Uh-huh.
And just learning how to make half square triangle blocks and all the traditional stuff. However, very, very early on, I realized that making the same block 75 times was not my cup of tea. And I think that's why I like log cabin, because I was doing scrappy log cabin from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And the scrappier quilts appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, making it up as I went along. I discovered art quilts, which was, total freedom.
Yeah.
So I would go from making, some kind of 9-patch, but with some kind of improvisation in between the 9 patches and,
Mm-hmm.
improvised borders, because my art quilt life was influencing the so-called traditional quilt life. And so I would kind of go back and forth between the two worlds and never worried about it.
Yeah.
Other than my art quilts were for the wall. So I might do painting on them and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Do you sell your quilts?
I have sold most of my quilts, actually, the ones that weren't made for family, up until the last few years. And the reason is I'm just not making them fast enough to sell. Uh, the quilts that I've been making have been workshop and pattern samples. I've had a few commissions in the last few years, but I haven't focused on making enough inventory to put up a for sale gallery, frankly.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
that is actually on my list for this year, is to move back into a more regular making routine.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm, not having traveled for over a year now has been
Yeah.
wonderful. I got a lot of the online class stuff, created and that sort of thing, but that's
Mm-hmm.
mostly in place now. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm going to make quilts for me, and some
Yeah.
of them will be for sale.
And how are the virtual and on-demand classes going? Are you really
Uh,
enjoying that process?
well, for me, it has been like heaven. It has been heaven. And partly because I have just been blessed with wonderful students located all over the world. I'm teaching folks who I would never have met in real life. Many of my students don't belong to guilds, even before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
They may have tried it and it wasn't for them, or they moved away from their guild and, whatever, for lots of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and, I've lectured to guilds in the UK, in Australia. I have students who live wherever in the world.
Yeah.
As long as the time zones are reasonably compatible,
Mm-hmm.
they can jump into a live class and, of course, the on-demand classes. But my students have been fabulous. They have responded really well. They love the fact that they are in their home with all their own material, their own real regular machine.
Yeah.
And that really makes the whole process so much easier, especially for the kinds of things I teach, which are mainly improvisationally focused.
Yeah.
So you have to make a lot of decisions in the moment. And if you don't have the fabric with you and it's not there, it's not as successful an experience.
Yeah.
And when you're home and you can reach behind you and grab that other yellow off the shelf, that was really the one you need.
Right. Right. And are you looking forward to doing in person again, or do you think you'll just kind of be sticking with doing just your virtual classes?
90% of the teaching I'm planning right now indefinitely will be virtual.
Mm-hmm.
I have put my name in the hat for a couple of in-person events. They're kind of long form events, where I'd be someplace for 3 days or something teaching. and lecturing. So I may be doing a little of that, but I will not be getting on the road again to do, a workshop day here and there. That's not in my plan at this point.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's a
Yeah.
lot to do. And now you have your YouTube channel. Did you
Yes.
is that real recent for you, your YouTube, or is?
Yeah, I had put a few tutorials on my YouTube channel going back maybe 2 years now. They weren't very well done because I didn't know a lot, as well as much as I know now, about filming and lighting and all that editing, but this past year, of course, we all had to like go from 0 to 100 in terms of learning how to use the tech.
Mhm.
So, and as you know, because you're one of my interviewees, I'm doing these sort of long form interviews with people. And that I've been growing that slowly. And it has two components. One is, of course, the tutorials and information about classes and patterns. I'm starting to put a little more information like that on the channel because
Mhm.
I find people respond to seeing, me talk about a quilt and, how to make the pattern or a little bit about what the workshop's about. Um,
Mhm.
and then the other part, which is really important to me, are the interviews that I've been doing. So those have been
Yeah,
fun.
which are pretty darn cool. I mean, that's such a good idea. And I think a lot of people have started that during the pandemic,
Mhm.
doing the podcasts and more interviews. So it's kind
Yeah.
of cool. I like being able to see the actual person. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm getting to know them personally.
Yes.
Um, so do you have a favorite with your solids or prints?
Oh, it's funny you should ask. uh, I lean towards prints as the focus fabric. And then
Mhm.
I love ombres, especially the gelato ombres by Maywood Studios and grunge. So
Mhm.
I'm more of a texture and color moving across the surface kind of person.
Mhm.
Uh, but this past actually 3 months, I've been more focused on solids and working with solids. I
Mhm.
joined an improv virtual bee, and we will all be working with solids each
Oh.
month. And my improv modern mystery workshop is all based on solids. Well, I'm
Mhm.
working with solids. So most of my students are too.
Yeah. I think Instagram has made me kind of lean a little bit more towards solids. I still love my prints, but
Mhm.
I've kind of been trying to incorporate some more solids.
Yes.
Um,
But for me to just work with solids is a challenge.
yeah.
And that's part of what I'm enjoying about the Improv Modern Mystery Workshop is that I am working solely with solids.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
as I made the videos.
Yeah.
And, but it was a struggle.
I hear you. I think, are we going to see some of your quilts?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint and I want to talk about some quilts and also sustainability.
Yep.
All right, so let me share my screen and get move that out of the way, get the slideshow going.
And since there's just a few of us, I just wanted to also say hi to Irva, and she's a quilter in California, and she's making these really cool baby round baby play mats that are really cool. So hi Irva, I don't know if you can, I know your camera's not on, but just wanted to say that.
Hi, Irva. Well, I this first slide, can you all see the slide, by the way? Just
Yes.
double check. Okay. I just went over, talked about some of my background already, and thank you very much, Mary, for that lovely segue in. Uh, but I also wanted to mention that I actually didn't get into modern quilting as a formal activity until I moved down here to Sarasota, Florida. But even going back 20 some years, I was making quilts with a modern aesthetic, but none of us really had that language at the time. But I've been very active in the modern quilt movement with the Modern Quilt Guild and starting a guild here in Sarasota, which has been fun.
Oh,
Uh, Thought I'd start with just a glimpse into my sewing space. I'm very fortunate that I have dedicated space in our house, and I've always had dedicated space. I really know what a privilege that is, to be able to just leave your stuff out. And recently I built a new, or installed, I guess I should say, a new uh, design wall, but this is the view. My back is to the quilt. This isn't the quilt that's really behind me now, but this is where the quilts hang. As I'm working, I have my blocks there, they're all spread out, and it's a really nice high and wide space because I put up some new board on it. And this just shows you a couple of views. And then I sit in the corner here to piece. I don't do much quilting, but when I do my quilting, I actually move this table back out of the way and my lights so that I can pull my sewing machine table out and give myself that space in the back you need to hold your quilt when you're quilting.
yeah.
And this is just a couple other views. This is what it looks like for me on the right here when I'm doing what I'm doing right now and teaching. I have an overhead camera and, of course, my laptop camera facing me. And so I have, a good setup. And also in my workshops, I use pre-recorded videos. Because when I took workshops last year and even the year before, what I didn't enjoy was when teachers had to move their camera around and I would get seasick as the camera kind of bounced around. So
Yeah.
I pre-record my sewing demos. And, I can play those, short 5-minute or, 10-minute maximum videos. And it's a smooth way to show, sewing curves or, anything that's a little tricky. But most of the time I just have step outs, and a lot of my teaching is improv. So I'm showing people how to make the improvisational cutting decision. And I do that live. That's live.
It's a nice setup.
Thank you. Let's go one more. All right, here we are. I want to talk a few minutes about sustainable stashing. It's become something that I've become more and more serious about in the past year or so. I've been thinking about it for a while. My thinking actually started when we moved to Sarasota, because we moved from a bigger house in Maryland, because all houses are, not all, but our houses were bigger in Maryland, to a very small standard Florida house. And I realized we were moving to a smaller space. So I got rid of a lot of stuff, fabric, that I had just accumulated. It was piled everywhere. It wasn't organized. It was kind of all around me in this nice room I had, but I had more space. So I just kept collecting and hoarding, frankly, more fabric because it wasn't stuff I was using. So that started me thinking about, what am I doing? What's happening here? And just in this past year, through some conversations with some wonderful people, other quilters who have a growing concern about sustainability and the impact, particularly for those of us who have the privilege of living in wealthier parts of the world and have more disposable income in our lives. What are our habits doing? And what kind of fabric and textile economy are we actually supporting? So I'm just starting my own journey, but I'm getting more serious. So for me right now, where I am, sustainable stashing means a few basic places to start. It's about knowing your stash. That is, what do you actually have in those boxes and bins and under the beds? And even those of us who have smaller spaces probably have more stuff than we realize. And I'm mainly focused on fabric because I'm not a big gadget person. I don't have 17 sewing machines. I have one, and one very cheap sewing machine that I would take when I go to, sew at a retreat or something. But for me, it was about fabric. And I thought I was organized. This is a glimpse into one of my closets here in Florida. But I started to think about what are some good principles to at least give myself some grounding. Of course, knowing your stash and buying local when possible, meaning local quilt shops or small quilt shops that are online. I do frequent the ones on Etsy and so forth. But it also means when I do buy, I buy with intention and self-control. And of course, it starts because I know it's in my stash. And so I know what I need to fill in the gaps or for a particular project. And also some creative sourcing. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things I do and don't do now where that's concerned. But there are some stories that we quilters tell ourselves. And this is not to blame anybody, because I have told myself every one of these stories probably yesterday. So this fabric is too pretty to cut up. It needs a special project. It's out of print. So if I use it, it'll all be gone and I won't be able to get any more. So we have this scarcity mentality that keeps us from actually using that fabric that we paid, whatever we paid for it. I know a lot of us as quilt makers, we support social events and projects for all kinds of reasons, whether it's, blankets for Linus or quilts of valor or, children who are in shelters, whatever it might be. And yet when we go to our stash, I said it last week, actually, as I was looking at some fabric. This fabric is too good for charity or giving away. In other words, it's back to that I need a special project. And I'm just noticing when that little voice in my head is saying this stuff. And I say, is this true or necessary? I used to have a lot of someday bins. And by that, I mean, buy the fabric and the pattern or print it out or your sketch. You put it all in a nice bin and you stack it somewhere under a bed or in a closet, but you never make the quilt. And so all that fabric, those 6-8 yards of fabric or whatever are sitting in a bin for someday. And I've been cleaning those out. We tell ourselves lovely words like, it's my fabric collection. I'm a curator. Actually, I just bought a t-shirt that says I'm a fabric curator. Except we actually don't have, like, it's as if we have a museum of fabric. But the problem is that real museums and real curators don't buy everything, don't acquire everything. They are quite selective. And they rotate what they have in the collection for viewing. Are we rotating all that fabric that's stacked up for use? We're not just viewing it. We buy quilt fabric to make quilts. Couple stories real quick about, I'm a member of 2 guilds right here in Sarasota and one virtually. But I've always belonged to 1 or 2 guilds all my life. But in the last couple of, well, probably 4 years here in Florida, where there are millions of quilters, my guilds have been the recipients of several fabric collections, I'll call them, of quilters who have passed on or who physically are no longer able to quilt. So their families look for somebody to do something with the fabric. So we've gotten 2 major calls about that, maybe 3 in one of my guilds. But what shocked and really brought a lot of us to kind of to our senses was the amount of fabric in one of those estates in particular. The sheer number of bins of fabric, and I'm talking about, those plastic bins, that are like, this. And there were 50, 60 bins, not
Oh,
just in the home and the garage, but also in a storage space. Now, this was a person who quilted all their life. They made quilts, but what was left behind was, and it's not so much about wasting money. It's not about that. It's about, I thought about all the fabric there that could have been made into quilts that would have made somebody happy.
mhm.
Or even, making clothes or whatever you do with your fabric. And I decided right then and there that when my day comes, I don't want I don't have kids. I have nieces and nephews. I don't want my nieces and nephews to have to walk in and have to, and say, "Oh my gosh, look at all this fabric Aunt Carole never got to use." I
Mhm.
don't want them to say there's going to be some left. It's not like I'm going to use every single scrap of fabric I have. I'm not that unrealistic.
Yeah.
But I don't want a storage building or storage locker unit. I don't want a garage full of fabric. I want, you know, a manageable amount of fabric so I can go in and do a project and maybe have to do some intentional buying. But anyway, those are real stories, and that happened more than once. That happened more than once. And I hear so many quilters, when they're honest, admit that that's what's happening in their own homes.
Yeah.
So there are two things that I say to myself. Not if, but when I decide to buy some fabric, and I bought some last week, how will I use this purchase today or tomorrow? And I bought the fabric because I needed to finish a project and I needed that particular black grunge. I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. And actually, I know the next project that it's going into. And it's not a someday project. These are, on the schedule
Yeah.
for the next actually 3 months. And the other thing I ask myself before I buy anything is, what do I already have that I can use instead of buying that fabric today? And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying I will never buy fabric. That's not what this is about. So here are my strategies. As I mentioned, I organize, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. I now piece all of my backings, because that's another way to take those large amounts of bigger scraps, especially that are left from a project. It's
Mhm.
not enough to really use it in the next project because it's not a yard, it's a half a yard or less than half a yard. It's a little more than the fat quarter. What do we do with all those odd size scraps? Because none of us are making that many scrap quilts, to be honest. I piece all my backings now, every single one. And it was something I never did. I always bought the wide back fabric
Yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. Don't do that anymore. Um, I am sourcing all my fabric for all my charity quilts, almost always out of my uh, storage, not my storage area, but my piles of fabric.
Mhm.
And instead of one of my guilds, we buy some fabric for people who may not have as much fabric to use, or for whatever reason don't want to use it. I no longer take that fabric. I only work really with my fabric, unless it's a specific colorway or something, and we want to keep something consistent. I've been making a lot of quilts for family and my special friends and giving them away, making the rounds again for people who haven't had a quilt from me. And sometimes I realize 10 years. So Lord
Mhm.
knows where those old quilts are. I don't worry about them. When I send you the quilt, I don't ever need to know what happened to it. It's yours.
Yeah.
You do it. You can use it for the dog. I don't care. I have a friend who makes dog beds. And so, again, odd pieces of fabric, leftover batting, not enough to do anything with. I put those in bags for her, and she uses them to stuff beds for dog shelters and so forth.
Great.
Um, I am very intentional about my buying. I only shop at small family-owned quilt shops, and I do not shop my guild's free table because that's just another way of moving my stuff that I've got too much of to your place where you've got too much of.
Yeah.
Uh, and I do not accept fabric from friends. It hurt me to my heart a couple months ago. One of my guildies said, "Oh, I found this fabric and it really looked like you." And she was sort of right. And I looked at it and I thought, no, I don't need it. I will not use it. I already have a lot of stuff that looks just like it. And I sweetly and kindly, I hope, said, no, I'm really kind of maxed out. I also right now don't give to Goodwill. I will when I get to, certain, types of fabric, because there are lots of new quilters and new sewers who buy from Goodwill. Fabric tends to go pretty quickly at thrift shops of most types. But I'm not doing that because that's another easy out for me to take 2 yards of fabric, put it in a, something and say, oh, I've been destashing. No, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I gave them 2 yards of fabric and a magazine. I've been
Now you can go buy
emptying.
more.
I've been emptying all of my someday project bins because I realized most of them have been sitting there for 2 years. So I take all that fabric, I sort it into the spaces because I sort by color and type,
Mm-hmm.
and I will put that pattern or idea, it's mostly my own patterns, and put them in a small folder and just put it on the bookshelf. Most of the time, I don't have to save the paper because I've got electronic files. And that has been such a relief to get those someday project bins, get that fabric into the live stash.
Yeah.
So here are some tips for getting started. Start slowly. Pick, like I've got, bins that are already labeled with just African print fabrics, but I still empty that bin, go through it, fold it all carefully, and stack it back and just make sure that what's in that bin is really what's supposed to be in that bin or on that shelf. I collect, you see on the bottom here, these striped fabrics. I was collecting those for a while. I went through them to make sure I knew what I already have so that I don't buy some more of something similar to what I already have. And I use these for bindings and also in my improv projects. I try not to blame and shame myself and certainly not others. I am where I am. The point is start today, organize, review, clear out stuff you're really not going to use and either put it on the back of a charity quilt if it's 100% cotton. I mean, I'm not talking about trash fabric because I found a little of that. And that went in the dog bed pile because it wasn't good enough or whatever. Or it just, I knew I would never use it. But I didn't say to myself, oh my God, I can't believe, why did I buy blah, blah, blah. I don't go down that path. There's no point. I
Yeah.
say, I am where I am, and I'm going to be thoughtful today. Today, I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to clear out this little cubby right here and
Mm-hmm.
organize that fabric. And I think about today and tomorrow, and I maintain a sense of optimism. I notice sometimes people get sort of depressed when they look at their stash and feel a sense of overwhelm.
Right.
And that's about feeling ashamed, feeling embarrassed, whatever. I try to move past that with a little calm breathing and put a smile on my face and some fun music and just do a little bit. I'm not
Mhm.
trying to do my whole house at one time. And getting support. And that makes a difference. And this is a picture I put in. This is really recent. Finished this yesterday
Oh.
because I'm in an improv solids B. Uh, That's where a bunch of us, every month, one of us will have a prompt and a color palette, but we're all working with solids throughout the year. And I thought that I had organized all my solids when I, 4 months ago or whatever, started filming my improv modern mystery class. I thought I'd pulled everything out.
Mhm.
I was so wrong. I had pulled out what you see on this shelf on the left. What I had not realized is I had two overflowing bins. These are overflowing large bins of solids. I had completely forgotten about them. And so I pulled those bins out into my sewing room yesterday. And I went and I said, I'm just going to work on this. I think I worked on it a little bit Friday and a little bit Saturday. So I broke it up a little bit, but I said, I'm just going to finish this. I need to know what's in here so I can be part of my improv bee. I'll bet I don't have to buy anything. And I
Yeah.
doubt that I will. And so here you see me starting to sort in colors. I used a couple different color wheel tools because some of the fabrics were sort of those in-between shades and tints. So I used my expanded color wheel, the 3-in-1 tool, to help me kind of see what kinds of fabric colors do I have. It also reinforced for me where my buying habits are. And now this area that you see here is much more organized and it is full. All of these shelves are full, but there's no overload. These are just my solids. And I think I now have, unless I have a surprise somewhere, pulled all of my solids out and they're organized in color scheme. So this is brand new that you're seeing here.
Pretty
And this
rainbow
isn't
of
all of
color.
it on the table, by the way. This is an
Oh.
in progress shot. And it's different amounts. I mean, I had some really small scraps that I just threw in my scrap bin because I have a small scrap bin. And a couple things I threw in the dog bed bin.
Mhm.
But most of it was everything from a couple yards down to fat quarters. And I just keep all of it. I don't separate my fat quarters in one place and my yardage somewhere else. I keep all my colors of every size in one of these cubbies. And this closet is in my active sewing space. And so let me show you a couple quilts. All of these quilts were made completely with stash fabric that I had bought anywhere from a year before I made the quilt to 4 years in some cases a little more. The only quilt that I bought some fabric for is the one on the left. I made a Baltimore Ravens football team themed fabric, theme quilt for a nephew. And I
Mhm.
didn't have any, sports fabric that I don't buy. So I had to buy a yard, I think, of that, or yard and a half. But everything else came out of my stash. And I even used some of my African print fabrics as well as solids
I like
to
that.
make that quilt.
Mhm.
And the quilt in the middle is one of my Stash Jazz quilts. Yeah, it's a Stash Jazz quilt. Because I actually wrote a pattern to help people think about using their stash to make a quilt.
Mhm.
And these quilts, I had a pretty deep collection of ombre fabrics, and those are the ones you see on the left and right. And I've been using those just very religiously. And in fact, I'm using them up, I'm proud to say. Um,
Yay.
and it would have been very easy for me to go crazy because with these fabrics, because this ombre manufacturer had offered to be a sponsor. And they contacted me well over a year ago. And I said, thank you. Send me the color, swatches and so forth. But I'm stocked up and I'll let you know when I need something. I was so proud of myself. Turns down free fabric. I'll be getting back to them to remind them saying, is that offer still good? Because
Yeah.
I'm running out of some stuff. But then in the middle here is one of the quilts that I made recently for my 5x5 pattern coming out soon. And I dug into my solids. Again, this is one of the quilts I made thinking, I know where all my solids are. Not. This is the Stash Jazz quilt. This is one of the layouts. There are actually 2 pieced blocks in this pattern. I also run this as an occasional workshop, but the focus is that people pull out their scraps and, small pieces of fabric from their stash that they're not quite sure what to do with. And we talk about creating a colorway. In this case, mine is a vibrant, scrappy approach.
Mhm.
But you could take this approach with a lot of different patterns, not all patterns, but many patterns you could, especially if you can use a variety of colors in the same spot in the blocks for the pattern. Like some of your patterns, Mary, I think would work really well with kind of a scrappy solids approach, for example.
Mhm.
Uh, and some of the other quilts I'm working on are my Afro modern quilts, and that is using African prints in a modern way. And this is the Improv Squares workshop that I ran this spring, I think last time. This is a close-up of a quilt I showed you earlier with some of those beautiful ombres from
So
Maywood
pretty.
Studios. I buy them, by the way, at equilter.com and from Etsy shops. Most local shops local to me, don't carry them. So I have
Oh,
to buy them online.
yeah.
Except now I'll ask for some free fabric when I need it. But this is another Afro modern where I used the African prints, and as you can see in the close-up on
Mhm.
the left, in a very minimalist kind of way. So they're really spotlighted.
Yeah.
This is another Afro modern quilt that I made
I like that.
3 years ago now. I want to make this again, but the gray fabric is actually an ombre. It's one of the gelato ombres. It goes from almost black, real deep charcoal, to very light gray.
Mhm.
Lots of improv piecing, and a little bit of two little bits of 2 of the ombre color fabrics. And
Same.
I have a workshop on sustainable stashing. We're going to kick it off on June 20th. It's a combo workshop with a live opening session, and then everything else will be on demand videos, so you can pop in and out. And there'll also be a Facebook group where we can support each other on our journey. So that's it. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I know, I think one of my problems is I like to buy prints. So then I'm like, well, I don't have any solids for my background. So I'm always buying just solids for the backgrounds, but I am guilty of, I'll put a project that I want to make in a bag.
Yes.
And then it's like, I can't touch that. It's got to stay there. Even though it's been
Right.
there for like 5 years, I'm definitely going to do it. So I need to relook at that.
Yeah. Unless it's a project that literally is on your calendar. This is my September work project.
Yeah.
If it's not on your calendar, and I know you, Mary, I know you're very organized businesswoman. I mean, you've got you've got a plan.
For that, I do.
And so, like you, like me, I mean, I was the same way. I had, workshops I was going to work on, and so I was going to make this sample for it, and
Mhm.
but it really wasn't in my work plan. It was in my
Yeah.
someday plan, which
Yeah.
isn't a plan. It's just putting fabric somewhere out of its availability to you for something you really want to do today. And that's what
Yeah.
happened with one of the bins I opened up. I had a print fabric in there that I just loved.
Mhm.
And I had put some grunge and ombres with it. And when I pulled it all out, I thought, I actually have a project I need to do next week. And this print is going to be the focus of that. And I'm going to use one of these grunges, but the others can go on the shelf, and I'll pull something else off the shelf. And I actually used it
Yeah.
and created a
Yeah.
sample. Now, if I hadn't pulled out that bin, I would have probably gone and bought another who knows what I would have done.
Yeah. And just to be able to pull it out so you know what you have.
That's it.
Yeah, because my closet, it's kind of
Yeah.
scary.
However, and I'm pushing myself on this. I pushed myself on this. If that someday project was not in my work plan, those fabrics went into the organization area of the stash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I haven't touched it in 3 years, I'm not going to do it next week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind, and it was not easy. It's a little painful.
Yeah. It's kind of like with the same with like your clothes closet, because you have like certain clothes that you think, definitely going to get back into those or something. And so they sit there for 5 years and take up space.
Right.
And,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's another story, huh?
I know. That's a whole other thing.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, thank you so much, Carole. Do Angela or Irva, do you guys have any questions that you would like to ask?
And thank you for being our audience.
Yeah. It was great. I love the quilts.
Thank you so much. How would you characterize yourself as a stasher? What's kind of your thing?
I'm new to quilting. So I've only
good.
had it a couple years now, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 bins full of fabric. So
It doesn't take long. But I tell you, you newer quilters can help us more long-term quilters, because if you're a newer quilter and you don't have a lot of stash, or you don't have a lot of variety in your stash, and if you belong to a guild or just an informal group, and you're saying, I'm stashing purple solids. If anybody has any purple solids, I'd love a fat quarter or half yard or, whatever. Ask us. And you might be surprised how much fabric you'll get for free. I mean, we won't sell it to you.
Yeah.
We will give it to you.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
true. How's your stashing going, Angela? I know she's more climate, because you're climate conscious quilts, right?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a lag, so if I'm behind, sorry. But yeah, I have so much fabric that I'm in the process of weeding it down now, because whenever I'm at the thrift store, I'm buying whatever pillowcase or like sheet that I could possibly use one day without a plan, and it has gotten totally out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, Angela, you put your finger on, one of the topics I'll be touching on in the sustainable stashing workshop, because that's a wonderful strategy to buy used fabrics, thrift shop, and some of that thrift shop fabric has not been used. It's just in a thrift shop. It's in a brand new package. So we're not contributing. I'm not contributing to the making of more fabric, and fabric dyeing and manufacturing is pretty impactful on the environment, particularly water. And I mean, I'm really a novice when it comes to that information. I'm just learning about that. But we can, overbuy that too, even though we're only spending $2 for a king size sheet. But it's the sheets that will pile up.
Yeah.
But I have not used thrift shop fabric. It's still something new for me. I may dip my toe in that water just to kind of get an experience with it.
Yeah. So is that it for you guys? No other questions for Carole? Nope. Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carole, for being here. And I just, I mean, I really admire what you do, and you just yourself as a quilter. I think you're an amazing person, and I'm so glad that you agreed to be a part of this for our membership and do this little presentation for us.
Oh, you are so welcome. I was honored to be asked, frankly, because I really admire what you are doing,
Oh.
which I think is building, in some ways a new audience, particularly in terms of the designers who are part of your effort. I mean, almost all of them were new to me, and I kind of try to keep an eye on, what people are doing.
Yeah.
Particularly over Instagram. So
Mhm.
I was thrilled to see what you're up to.
Yeah, I'm excited. Got some good stuff coming up, and Wendy, Wendy with the Weekend Quilter is going to be our next pattern feature for July. So I'm really excited to work with her, and she's just super nice. Everybody's just, been wonderful. So great.
Well,
and I think
go pull out a couple of those project someday bins.
I am. I'm definitely going to do that this week because I've been thinking of all this stuff I want to make, and I actually wanted to go get some African print fabric today. I have some, but I just need to look through it.
There you go. And then you can say, I don't have any purples and I need some purple.
Yeah. And it saves money, which we all can
That too.
to do.
That too.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Carole. Right. And I'll be seeing you on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We'll have to talk some more just to catch up and chit chat. And thank you again, Angela and Irva. Yeah. And thank you for Christopher, who couldn't be with us for very long, but I'm sure he'll be watching. So if you're watching, thanks, Christopher. See you on Instagram.
All righty. Well, thanks so much, you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.